This two-part audio and video podcast with Anthony Phillips, the former Genesis guitarist, is brought to you by Make a Difference with Records. Based in Godalming, we donate all our proceeds from record sales to the mental health charity Catalyst. Find out more about us at makeadifferencewithrecords.com. This is part one.
My name's Anthony from Make a Difference with Records, and I'm here today with Anthony Phillips. It seems strange, Anthony, that you've had a successful solo career of over sort of 50 years, and yet people still refer to you as the former Genesis guitarist in a band that you were only in for a 3-year hiatus, but that is how people tend to reference you. Does that wind you up still, or have you got used to it?
No, I think you just accept it as inevitable, really, because the group went on to worldwide success. So people want a headline, don't they? They want some sort of hook to hang things on. So that's a good way in, isn't it?
I guess so.
Which is associating you with that. And also, I don't mind that in a way, because obviously being one of the founder members, I was involved in the gestative, if that is the right word, period of the band, and without wishing to sound arrogant, did help to be part of the kind of both the sound and the direction that we started to take.
Yeah.
You know, I was influenced by other people as much as the others were. So we were the sum of influences, but we took all those on board and combined them. So I'm happy. And people often say they can hear traces of me in albums up to X. You know.
Oh,
so,
well, definitely. So if you,
yeah.
the 12-string sound, of course,
Yeah.
which if I was going to ask you about later, but as we're on the topic, let's talk about it now. The 12-string sound really as late as Trick of the Tail.
Exactly.
On things like Entangled
Very
and
much
Ripples,
so.
you can hear that.
Yeah.
If we just talk briefly then about that period, and then we'll come on to the Golden Hour, which is really what I want to talk to you about mainly. That period, a lot of Genesis fans don't really regard Genesis to Revelation as a Genesis album. They really regard Trespass as the...
No, I think that's fair enough, because it was a
album.
schoolboy album, exactly, yeah.
And sort of made to order, I guess, in a sense. A number of singles were wanted. And
yes, and I think it's very important to always point out with that album that we weren't really a group at that point. We were a
bunch of composers,
we
really,
were a duo of composers who got together.
Yes.
You know, Tony and Pete were the sort of keyboard wing, with Tony mainly playing and Pete writing some of the stuff on keyboards, but then Tony was playing it. And Mike and I were we were in all the school, what you call cover bands now.
Yes.
So we were the guitar wing, coming from the slightly harder rock side as well. Yeah. You know, we were more rolling, I wouldn't say they were more Beatles and we were more Rolling Stones, but we had much more Rolling Stones than them, if you like.
Yes.
So there was a harder edge coming from us.
Yeah.
Some of it was absolute rubbish. But on the first album, I mean, Jonathan King wanted us to do commercial stuff and to be overnight successes.
Yes.
And it's the most wonderful thing that we didn't, because the group was not particularly original, quite anodyne, I think. I mean, Pete's voice was what sold it to Jonathan King. I don't think the material was particularly good. I think Mike and Tony's stuff was stronger than ours. But once we discovered the two, because we were writing a lot of bad semi-blues stuff as well, and once we discovered the 12 strings, we did begin to find our own voice. But that didn't happen till the period after From Genesis to Revelation.
Yeah, so Stagnation and White Mountain,
exactly.
I guess we're talking about on Trespass.
So the constituent parts of From Genesis to Revelation were really Peter and Tony piano songs. Oddly enough, more piano stuff from me than guitar.
Yes.
Because I played piano in a really weird way. I used to play it with 3 fingers like that and play the tunes over like that. It was completely untechnical.
Why was that? Had you seen someone else do it?
Just was an amateur pianist, really. Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, some quite nice things came out of that. Often, intuition can be quite a creative thing. Sometimes too much learning. I mean, there are all these quotes, aren't they? Learning kills the instinct. I mean, we can go on that for hours. But I mean, Visions of Angels was actually done for the first album, but the version was so rubbish that we left it off. That was me. And actually, Place to Call My Own was a long 5-minute epic, which I think they're going to release the demo of when they re-release it. And Tony actually said recently, why didn't we include the whole thing?
Right.
So my contribution on that was much more piano. But overall, we weren't a band. We didn't really, we actually got together for a couple of weeks to rehearse the songs. So
Yes.
we weren't a fully fledged band. Probably our school band was the tighter band doing the
You're talking
covers.
about Anon,
Yeah, because we used to practice a lot and then do parties and stuff.
Yeah.
So Genesis was really just cobbled together for those recordings. And I mean, I think it's no coincidence that at the end of 6, 7, 8 months of hard practice and hard on the road, we sounded a much tighter unit.
Yes.
But it also developed a much more original voice with the 12 strings combining with the organ, which Tony hated to start with, but it gave the band a lot more colour. More variation of colour.
Can I ask you about that? I mean, I've read an awful lot about the 12-string sound, the fact that it was very unique and it was done in a different way.
Yeah.
Could you help us non-musicians to translate that? How exactly was the 12-string setup different?
Well, it all kicked off with one afternoon near the place called the Glade, which is down Farncombe Hill, which you would know, where we used to go smoking. And Mike and I, it's the summer of '67, so it was all very cosmic and stuff. But Mike and I emerged from singing, and there was this sort of gorgeous kind of ringing sound, sheening sound. There was this guy called Tony Robinson sitting and playing this, and I played electric, maybe a little bit of 16 acoustic, and I said, "What's that?" And he said it's an acoustic 12-string. Now, the kind of 12-string I'd heard was on Beatles records and the Byrds, but it was electric 12-string.
Okay.
Electric 12-string.
Yeah.
There was the old 12-string on the record, but it was always played strummy in the background. You couldn't really tell it from. But it was the gorgeous ringing sound from this, and I became seduced by the sound. So did Mike. So what we used to do was we used to sit and just play around with chords. I'd play one chord and he'd play another chord at the same time, and we'd get this sort of strange kind of mixture kind of sound, and then we'd start trying picking patterns and stuff like that. It wasn't kind of, we didn't set up with any kind of agenda. It was just exploring a kind of magical kingdom, really.
Okay.
And things like White Mountain and Dusk and quite a few others, and all the basic material from Stagnation, and even some of the couple of things that went into Musical Box,
Yes.
came from that period actually before we went up. We went to the cottage to rehearse. So Mike and I were very busy during '69 after leaving school and doing A-level and stuff. We were actually very busy developing that more and more and more. We were seduced by it.
So was it therefore rather than the tuning setup of the guitars, it was more the interaction and the overlaying of guitars that was.
Well, it was both
unique,
actually, because we were starting to experiment with different tunings as well.
Okay.
Particularly Mike. I mean, I was doing it a little bit. Used to drop. The traditional thing was to do what's called drop D, where you drop the bottom string to D, but we dropped the top string to E to D,
Right.
which created an E minor seventh when you were playing an E minor chord, which was interesting. But then Mike came up with this tuning called F sharp tuning for Musical Box, which was extraordinary. And I played in normal tuning on top, which created quite an interesting combination. So. It wasn't. I weren't probably doing. This is a very good question. There must have been other people doing similar things at the same time, but we took it. We just went on. We just really went exploring, really, with chords, arpeggios. Where you play the notes apart, broken chord, and trying different cross rhythms and stuff like that. Nothing intellectually thought out. It was all just very much. I really like that.
So also a bit spontaneous, jamming together and just seeing what worked.
Yeah, and also if you just slide, just slide up and down the guitar, you're going to get some you're sort of you're kind of looking at chord positions that would sound one way on a 6-string that sound quite different on a 12-string.
Yes.
One of the key things is you've got the four lower strings are in octaves.
Yes. Yeah.
So actually, you're creating if you then span those over a piano, you get a very odd set of. It's very interesting. I've tried to do this with 12-string. Sometimes is transpose it transcribe it. Anyway, whatever it is, not transpose, that's changing key. Put it on the piano, and you need 3 hands because you've got a lot of tightly bunched notes in the middle like that.
Yes.
Because you can play a higher note on the lower string,
Right.
which you can't on a piano. You can only play a note in one place.
Yeah.
And then the octaves start creating all sorts of things. So you end up with a group of notes like that, and then some chaps out here. And so it's very, very, very interesting. And if you get 2 guitars doing that interweaving, you are creating something that is very different to anything that's keyboard based or much more varied than you would get on a normal 6-string. Because of the octaves.
It's a very, very distinctive sound. As you said, you can definitely hear it on the later records, and that's definitely carried through.
Yeah.
And you can hear it a lot in your own work throughout the years that you've been
Well,
recording.
I started experimenting with some really weird tunings where you tune each pair, not just in octaves, but you tune them to separate notes. So you'd actually have a 9-note. For instance, the title track of Golden Hour has a 9-note. The 9 different notes of the 12. So you have to be very careful because when you move chromatically, it's sort of suddenly you get this horror chord, but actually when you get the nice ones, you get this lovely sort of scrunchy quality. They're probably not a million miles different to some of the stuff that Ravel and Debussy did in terms of some of their complicated chord patterns, where they're and or maybe stuff particularly which they did for 4 hands as well. I mean, being technical, you start creating things like minor 7, 9, 11ths and stuff like that, where you've got added notes to set chords.
Right.
And there's a point at which it can become a little bit too discordant for some people. But we always say fairly harmonic. Fairly harmonic. We never went normally into real dissonance.
Okay. So you've touched on Golden Hour, which leads us nicely on to where I probably should have started this interview. So we thought we'd probably seen the last of Private Parts and Pieces with the previous one, which came City of Dreams, which came out in 2012, as I remember, and yet here we are 12 years on with the Golden Hour. It looks like Jonathan's been digging around a lot in some archives. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. I mean, he managed to find some stuff from 80s and 90s, particularly, which I'd completely forgotten about. I mean, you sort of wonder about your memory, and then you think, hang on, I remember things very clearly from slightly before that. I think it was because of the fact that I was doing, it was lean. I bought my house in early 80s, and interest rates were 3 million%, 16%, and I'd had the reasonable success with the Geese to the Ghost. Then everything was so badly timed with punk and disco and stuff, and all the punk guys were being witch hunted and all the rest of it, and so I really couldn't get anywhere. So I was trying all sorts of different things. I still had a deal in America for albums, but they were selling a little bit, so I was trying lots and lots of different things. So I was pitching at things left, right, and centre, working at every hour God gave. And I tried some pieces for Wyndham Hill, the New Age company in the States, and I don't know what I was doing, because I mean the brief was music, the whole thing about New Age was music to kind of chill to, and meditate. Nothing wrong with that. You want a lovely backcloth. These pieces of music that John suddenly played me, I thought, well, hang on, what this? Wyndham Hill, this is incredibly dynamic. These are changing all the time.
Yes. People
are going to be sort of, if they're doing yoga, they're going to sort of break their neck listening to this stuff, with the time changes. So he played with these 4 pieces. Then he found 2.
Was that Witchmore Hill?
Yeah.
Then 4. Yeah.
That's right. Then he found 2 duets with Kike, which we'd done. He'd come over a couple of times, Kike Barro Garcia, and we'd improvised lengthy bits. We'd previously used some stuff, but he found these other 2 pieces which I knew nothing, and he also found a vocal version of Roads in Between, which I'd have absolutely no recollection of doing. I knew I'd had the lyrical line, the main line, but I didn't know I'd fleshed out the rest of it. So we had suddenly quite a rump of material, at which point I thought, well, hang on, let's approach Mark Powell at Cherry Red and see whether he thinks we've got the bases. Because if this is going to be the rump. Now we have to find other pieces. There's nothing else that's hugely substantial. And he said, yeah, no, I think that's really worth putting out. So at that point, I set off then looking for other things. And I diverted a couple of piano pieces, which are going to be on this piano album I've been working on for a long time, but I've had wrist issues. So I diverted a couple of piano pieces across, couple of synth pieces, and I thought, well, actually, we're going back to the original PP, really, which was a mixture of lots of stuff taken from different times, different styles, but hopefully try and make it homogeneous. There have been some PPs that have been recorded deliberate, all new, and some like 5 and 6, which are all one instrument. But let's try and make this as diverse as possible, but try and give it a flow.
So are the piano pieces on the album mostly new material then that you've written recently?
Newish. I say newish. Within the last 20 years. Yeah. Not. Whereas Whitmore Hill was from the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Kike stuff is from the 90s. But we weren't sure about the dates, so some people were complaining that we didn't have the dates and all the rest of it. But we tried to point out that actually you normally go into that forensic detail on re-releases.
Yeah.
You don't, on a normal album, people start going into ferocious detail on every track about exactly when it was recorded and all the rest of it. So I think people were getting a bit anally retentive about that one. So I quite like the idea that I didn't want people to particularly to know actually when it was all recorded, because they might. I wanted it to feel like it was all one piece.
Well, certainly if we start with Whitmore Hill, which is what the first 20 minutes of the album, 4 sections.
Yeah.
Was that written at the time as 4 collective pieces, or have you brought things together to make up that suite?
No, that was written for Windham Hill, amazingly.
And hence the play on the name, Whitmore Hill, or not?
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
you're the first person that spotted that, actually.
Hooray!
You're the first person that spotted that. Yeah, because I liked the W, and I thought we can't call it Windham Hill Suite, and I thought, well, hang on, I want something that sounds English.
So you made something up that
I made
word
something.
existed in Google.
Yeah, it occurred to me in a pub one night.
Oh, there you go, pub quiz.
It did actually. It occurred to me in a pub. Yeah. We used to play cricket near a place called Winchmore Hill, and I thought, hang on, Winchmore Hill with a Y it's a nice feel, yeah. So
the one thing about, I love that suite, and the thing that I particularly like about it is there's a lot of pace changes in it.
Yeah.
But it sounds incredibly optimistic and positive, particularly the first part.
Yeah, I know,
was it a particularly happy period for you when you wrote it?
No.
It wasn't.
Well, it was a quite. I wasn't unhappy, but I had 2 lodgers in my house, and I was struggling to survive, and I was doing every project that got sent my way, often for no money at all.
Okay.
And so I was just, I was a bit of a beast of burden, but I had a lot of energy, and needs must, I think. Needs must. What's interesting is that I actually added some orchestral type instruments on top, which were primitive samples, which sounded absolutely dreadful. Absolutely dreadful.
So you stripped a lot of that back out when you
well, John did,
when you remastered it.
Yeah.
No, but it flows really well. And as I said, the first part in particular, you really feel that sense of energy and joy. It's a really it's quite an inspiring piece from my perspective.
Oh, it's very kind of. I was really surprised. There were so many surprises on this. This is what's extraordinary. There's one of them. I can't remember if it's. I had to find titles for this. Ring of Steel. I think. Anyway,
Ring of Steel is
the one that's fast. The one that's fast. I said to John, "Look, that's not me. I can't play that fast. That's somebody else." He said, "No, that is you."
Well, it was pretty impressive. I'm no guitarist anyway.
I remember thinking, I can't play that fast. playing on a very easy ovation guitar, which is very easy to play, but it just made me, maybe I'd forgotten that my technique was a lot better then, because pre-computers, you had to play everything. Since computers, you spend half your time looking for sounds, playing things one-handed. But that was perforce, library music, trying to make a decent career. So I was very surprised by it. I
can actually play the guitar. Hey, who'd have thought it?
Yeah.
Who'd have thought it?
But it just seemed to have something. I think it was the energy, as you say, it was the energy about it that made me think, well, hang on.
It really comes across.
Maybe this, and then the Kike stuff, particularly the dark ones, Sarabande Noir, was really mysterious. And on that one, I said to John, that's not me. Kike's double tracking. That's not my style. That's not my style. Because normally Kike plays the lead part, and I play the chord part, and he's playing the chord part, and I'm playing the lead part, and I'm semi-improvising. I've got a rough idea of the tune, but when it goes into that dark, slightly swirling, where the harmony goes a little bit close to the edge, but then sort of comes out again, I think I was just vamping through that.
I don't know how to say this without you probably looking at me as if I'm completely mad, but the very first part of the suite, the very first track, when I first heard it, I was thinking, that reminds me of something. What does it remind me of? And then suddenly, out of nowhere, I thought, Puff the Magic Dragon. The very first bit.
Really?
There's just something about...
I think you could be right, actually. Yeah.
There's something about the cadence and the way it rounds again.
Da, 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 da. Yeah, you're right, actually, yeah. That was supposed to be about drugs, wasn't it?
Apparently not.
Oh, right, it wasn't. Good,
apparently, because it was Peter of Peter, Paul and Mary, wasn't it, that wrote it?
Yeah.
I think he was once quoted as saying that it was lazy research.
They've quashed that, okay.
Yeah, they've quashed that.
Well, people are always looking for controversy, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
Even in areas like Genesis.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, anyway, moving rapidly on.
Yes, absolutely.
Moving rapidly on. I wanted to ask you about Roads in Between, the vocal version. Was that laid down at the time of the original instrumental, or was there some gap in between?
I've absolutely no idea.
Okay,
that's the trouble. That's why I put on the liner notes. I would swear in court I'd never done this, because I do not remember. John found it right at the end of a tape, and I'd obviously done it. I have no recollection of...
With the drum track on it, or did you add the drum track?
No, the backing track was already done. The backing track was already done because we
released the instrumental on
that's
extra
right.
Parts and Pieces
That was right.
XIII,
But at what point I did the vocal, I've absolutely no idea. That's what's just so weird about it, because it was found at the end of a tape.
Yeah. With the drum machine on it, or have you added the drum machine?
Exactly the same.
Okay.
Exactly the same instrumentation, and as I mentioned before, I'd always had the sort of hook, the kind of refrain line that comes at the end of each. Because there isn't really a verse, and it's strange. There's a verse with a sort of refrain line,
yes,
and then you've got the middle section where it goes. I've no recollection of doing that vocal part at all.
Okay,
no recollection at all.
On good form.
And when John played it to me as it was going hard, I was thinking, please, please don't break down. And when it gets to the last line, I'm thinking it's close, but I think I've just about got away with it. I couldn't believe it. It is triple tracked, I think. I think it's triple tracked.
Okay.
Double tracked or triple tracked.
With lots of reverb.
Well, yes, I think the reverb, the Stephen Taylor added more reverb to the track itself as well.
Okay.
So it wasn't just in John's mix. Yeah. He added extra reverb to give it a bit more space. Width. Yeah.
Baby, won't you tell me what to say? What I have to do? We just pretend we don't notice each other, and all the time, so it says by you.
So the next thing I wanted to ask you about from the Golden Hour is I've got a really soft spot for piano pieces as well as guitar, and there were a couple of tracks on the album, in particular Twilight of a Diva, which I found really moving.
Oh,
The other
thank
one
you.
was Catherine Down's Trad with the other one, but Twilight of a Diva in particular, it came across to me as really cinematic. Did you compose that with something in mind, or was it just more of an emotional journey when you wrote that one?
I have to be honest with you, it was an improvisation.
Oh, really?
I improvised it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I had the tune. I must have come up with the tune, just recorded it. That's it.
Oh, wow. Just
Straight
literally
off.
on straight off.
Straight off. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
We did an edit where it goes into octaves. It stopped, and then we did an edit into octaves. It was done not on the best piano. It's not the best sound in the world, but fun enough, my girlfriend didn't like the title Twilight of a Diva, and I stuck with it. Actually,
Where did that come from? Once you put it together, you just heard something in it that was. It's quite melancholy, isn't it?
I've always loved French music. I've always had this thing about French cafes and the Seine and the rain. Yeah. And I just pictured this kind of slightly at the end of 3 or 4 in the morning. This is woman being reflective. Yeah. That was the vibe. No, thank you very much.
No, it reminded me a bit of. Have you ever seen the film La La Land?
I have indeed. Yeah, you bet.
Do you remember the very last bit where she goes into Sam's bar, and they meet,
do.
and then he starts playing that piano?
How can I forget it?
It was that cinematic.
How forget it? How can I
feel
forget it?
that I kind of they don't sonically sound similar, but that to me it was that mood and that pathos and that sadness.
It may have been very what is the word again? I'm losing my words. It may have been slightly influenced somewhere at the back of my mind by, there was a film called Diva in the early 80s.
Okay, I'm not familiar with
No,
that.
well, I didn't think you were, because I think you would have, because that had...
Is it an erudite film? Is that why I wouldn't be familiar with it?
Erudite film.
Erudite.
You don't want to get stuck with that one. Sorry, it's terrible. It was a sort of Debussy Ravel-esque piece, but it had a repetitive kind of refrain, and I think I was subliminally, that's what I'm after, subliminally influenced by that, but I'd have to get that. I mean, it was so long later that any influence would have got sunk way deep in. But I always I can't actually say to you that was influenced by anybody. It just came out. It just came out.
Wow. And Catherine Downs, Trad?
It's an Australian thing that I came across and just loved the tune, and then just did my arrangement of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Then towards the end of the album, we get a run of about sort of 6 or 8 tracks, which are very, very short.
Yeah.
And they almost, I don't mean this critically, they almost come across as kind of like a work in progress, unfinished business. Am I being harsh, or is that a fair comment? Are they things that might develop in given time?
I think that
Rushlight, for example.
Yeah, I think that I left the order to John, to be honest. Right. I left the order to John, so that we decided to have a certain amount of links.
Yeah. And
maybe we overdid the shorter pieces later.
Yeah.
But the idea was to have long pieces and then little links. Basically, we were just taking the material that we had.
Yeah.
Like there's a piano piece called Summer's Lease, which again was an improvisation, but it definitely had a beginning. It was.
No, the piano pieces I think very much have a beginning and an end.
It was Orbits,
yes.
yeah. But a couple of things like And he came across this improvisation which was slightly more urban. Sorry, he came across this piece that was slightly more urban, which I thought, at first I thought, hang on, that doesn't really fit. But no, why not? It's not too weird. So that was the one I called Mean Streets, which is slightly more electronic. But then that goes into a big washy sort of synth thing. Just one of those things where you experiment with the right order. And from what you're saying, you probably feel that we've got too many shorter pieces later.
I mean, that's a personal thing. Other people may disagree.
Fair comment. It's always a tricky one where you're doing assembling stuff from different times, but trying to give it a kind of homogeneous feel.
It was almost. I mean, in a way, it was a compliment. But it was more like sort of wanting more, because the first pieces,
yes, I know what you mean,
are so substantial,
longer and substantial,
and incredibly powerful. Say Whitmore Hill, which we've talked about, and the piano pieces are so emotionally pulling.
Thank you.
It's just kind of when you get to the end, you're thinking, well, I wonder where that was going to go.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I think it was. I'll be absolutely honest. You hit a point here, which my worry was that the first group of pieces are long and really substantial, and that were we going to be able to get enough other material that was really substantial. But I felt that given we got those 7 that were substantial, that with piano pieces we'd be able to. It's possible that we actually put in too many of these shorter ones, but
well, I'll let others decide on that, because I'm one of many people. But I love the album.
Well, thank you.
Overall, even though I should point out it's 1 minute 22 seconds shorter, being an hour.
Oh, really?
Just on a trade subscription point of view.
Really? Is that
before
right?
Someone sues you for that 1 minute 22. Where did that title actually come from, The Golden Hour? Was it because it was an hour long?
It was because of the photo.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. No, it wasn't the photo. It was I'm wrong. No, the iPhone, as you know, does this compilation of just randomly does a compilation of your photographs.
Oh, this time last year and all that stuff.
And gives it a title.
Oh, does it?
And it just called The Golden Hour.
I didn't know it had given it a title.
Yeah,
I knew it had done the random pictures.
No, it does that. Yeah,
Oh,
and so
okay.
I'd taken these photographs in Cornwall, where I stood up on a fire escape, keeping Patricia waiting for supper for about half an hour, watching this sun gradually sinking. I must have taken about 200 photographs.
As we all do, yeah.
And that was, this was called, by one of my friend's son, that's like a lava lake.
Yeah.
And so we...
Beautiful photo.
Yeah, thank you. So, there we go.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, before we leave the Golden Hour,
I do like that. It's 58. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, 1 minute 22
Well, you
seconds.
were a lawyer, of course.
I was a lawyer, you see.
You were a lawyer.
No, it's only because it came up when you put it on the CD
Yeah.
player. It came up and it said 58.
I never thought about it. Somebody would take it literally.
Well, of
Good
course,
Lord.
no, of course.
Yeah.
Take everything's very serious.
Matters in a court of law.
Well, talking of very, very serious questions, I have a very serious question for you, which is a matter of some concern, because I read on the liner credits that Rafe Bernasconi is retiring. Now, some would say that he's a figment of your imagination, given he's never been seen.
No, he exists. He exists. Many of the things that he's claimed to have done are being a little bit approximate with the verite, but he's very much a real character.
Yes.
He's not that musical, put it like that.
He's not that musical, yes. Well, anyway, Rafe Bernasconi, the thing that bothered me most is, what's going to happen to all the armadillos? Are they going to run riot throughout the country now that he's no longer training them?
Yes. Well, he rose to fame, actually, on The Geese and the Ghosts, because it was his voice that stood out on Henry when we came to listen to the rabble that we'd recorded for the crowd noises at the end of Henry.
Okay.
And we recorded the album on the barge, which you probably know.
Yes, I do, in Little Venice.
Yes, so we had to borrow the second barge when the timps didn't fit.
It wouldn't fit in the
first.
door, apparently. Yeah.
That's right. And so Jason Stirs, he was picking up the phone going, hello? What's that? Oh, it's the timpanist. But anyway, so we used the other barge. We had the singers and we had the non-singers. I think it's time to come clean about this story. And my friend Jeremy Gilbert conducted the singers. We quickly weeded out who could sing in tune and who couldn't.
Okay.
So I got the Duff lot. And it was an end of album party. This was it, the final thing.
And your good friend Rafe was...
And so off we went down, and we didn't listen till a couple of days later, till we came to mix. And 3 grown men were crawling around underneath the mixer as this one voice is blaring out this tune, very, very, very out of tune.
Okay.
But ironically, when it comes to the most difficult interval of the lot, he absolutely nails that.
Right.
But the rest of them, normally people go flat, but he's sort of going, oh, oh, oh. And as I said, 3 grown men, Simon Haworth, Mike Rutherford, and myself, crawling around on the floor in tears. And there began, and my 4 cricketing mates had come up from Isha, and they said, that's Rafe. That's definitely Rafe. Yeah.
So that's your proof that Rafe does exist then?
That's my proof.
Okay.
That
Well,
Rafe
we'll
exists.
leave it there, folks.
Yeah,
we'll
that's
let
right.
you decide.
Some of the later things you'll have to make up your mind whether he did ascend to the Commons and the Lords and all the rest of it. And
That's not the bit I'm most worried about. Actually, it's the armadillos that I'm most concerned about.
Yes, I mean, I think you'll have to make up your mind whether any of those are true. I
Yes.
mean, you might possibly say that, but I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, you could make an appearance on Would I Lie to You? You might be quite good at that, I suspect.
I love that program.
I want to move on to the topic of writing. Now, I know that you do an awful lot of TV music, film music, and library music. And I guess my question for you is, I know it pays the bills, and I know it's very sort of good from that perspective. Do you ever find it slightly restrictive and suffocating in terms of stopping you either from doing other things, or you're not able to be as artistically creative as you'd like to be when you write that stuff?
I think I was always able to keep a balance, actually, between doing library and doing albums. But I think after the slow dance experiment of doing a big album, which took a long time and
You can't call that an experiment. That's a wonderful album.
No, I'm saying, but it was by the end of it. It's like anything in life. If you work really, really, really hard at something, at the end you're A, exhausted, B, you cannot stand it. I couldn't listen to it without hearing all the faults. It was physically cringing, absolutely.
Right.
And everything had to be played. There was a little bit of sequencer, but the main parts all had to be played.
Yeah.
So you made the slightest error, you back to the front again. And I had nobody else there to help me. I had some help with the mixing, but and when that didn't really do anything special in terms of, well, it didn't in terms of money. I think that was the kind of writing on the wall for me in terms of taking on big albums. I just thought, well, it's just, and at the time I was still poor. It's ironically, the one thing it did do was, because it was filmic, it got me a publishing deal with Virgin, which absolutely saved the day.
Yes.
I got a 10 grand advance, which at the time was absolutely gold dust to me. And it absolutely saved me. So ironically, although it didn't do, I know it has a lot, it has many fans. In my microscopic, what is the word? I can't think. Microcosmic world.
Yes.
It did actually, and I'm very grateful for the people that love it, but it did actually achieve something far more important practically, which was it got me on the road to getting a publishing contract with Virgin, who then re-released the albums that crossed over to the artistic side, and then things moved on. But
so it's definitely an enabler. I guess I was asking you about whether if you fast forward and you come to the last sort of 10, 15 years, has one kind of overtaken the other and therefore pushed some of the solo work to the background?
I really had no choice. I had no choice because once library took off,
right.
I mean, the 90s was a mixture of albums and wildlife programs and a certain amount of library.
Yeah.
And I was starting to make a vaguely proper living.
Yeah.
But when the company got taken, the library company kept being taken over by bigger ones. We got very lucky during the process of the latter 90s and right through the 2000s. That was my sort of golden period in terms of library.
Yes.
Got we suddenly, figures just shot up, and so my 20 years of making very little money was suddenly replaced by suddenly making very decent money and getting non-stop work.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, you do a lot of library albums. You do tracks on a theme. I was getting whole CDs to myself. Got a double orchestral CD to myself, and
So you could explore your creative. You could use your creative side then because you had the scope to do it.
I
guess.
could up to a point, but there is always a limitation with library of
Yeah.
of the length, and also you can't change mood. So you've got that discipline. But it was on the other hand, I was never asked to do anything in a style that I didn't like.
Okay.
Like a poppy or a sicky. And I was told to come up with stuff which is atmospheric and dramatic, so I very much enjoyed it because you could do stuff very quickly as well.
Right.
Quick output.
Yeah.
Not slaving away over stuff. And I mean, it's true, obviously, that if you really put your back into something and spend a lot of time on it, often that's going to be rewarded with something that has longevity, hopefully like Slow Dance. Whereas I was never kidding myself that the library stuff was going to be something that would last. Although I was paid some nice compliments by people who said your stuff is timeless, but it's not going to be that interesting.
I think that's a fair description. Timeless. I think I would probably say.
Well,
agree
within
with
the library world, it was a nice thing to have because obviously it means you go on making royalties, and I still am. It's falling away now because there's obviously a younger crowd. But I never deluded myself that I simply had no choice really, which was that nothing else ever was really taking off. And once the company got this momentum, it was a gift horse. It was an absolute gift horse from about 94, 95 through to 2010, the banking crisis.
Yeah.
I made hay, and I was extremely lucky. Right place, right time.
Yeah.
We got taken over by Universal, first of all by BMG, and they were sort of saying, my friend Simon Mortimer was telling me they had a meeting of all the publishers and BMG, and they were saying, who are these people? Because obviously the top 10 were all the sort of well-known pop guys.
Yeah.
But then suddenly there was people like me creeping in around sort of 15, 16, saying, who are these people? Because they had this library company on the side which was generating not big money, but good steady money, which a lot of the others weren't. They were saying, who are these people? And so, and I was able then to buy some antique guitars, and I was able to buy a beautiful Steinway concert grand piano.
Very nice.
Yeah, but it took me 30 years to get there. But I think I will always regret the fact, just going back to the overarching issue of artistic career versus library. I will always regret the fact that I wasn't able to carry on with the trajectory that was created with the Geese and the Ghost, because that was the world that I'd worked towards through Genesis, leaving, studying, and then combining classical elements with rock elements, prog, which was not called prog at the time. And then I was blown completely off course. Goldmine's famous line in the Goldmine is the American record collector.
Yeah.
It was one of the greatest tributes I've ever had, which is the 10 prog albums you should listen to, and there's the Geese of the Ghost sat between Crime of the Century and Court of the Crimson King.
Oh, there you go.
Saying there's something on this album that everyone would love, and I remember thinking, God, wow, what that's
it is one of those albums that I go back to on a regular basis, and I find it very difficult to listen to God If I Saw Her Now without a tear welling up.
Sweet of you.
She left me one dark night. She took my heart for free. I've seen her not since then. Since then. God, if I saw her now.
I mean, we couldn't get a release for it. It sat on
know.
it sat on the shelf for a year and a half. So
Well, it was longer than that, wasn't it? Because most of it was recorded in, what, 70 to 70...
well, it was
2-3?
No.
Or written in 70.
Oh, it was written much earlier, but it was recorded, kicked off in late 74 and finished in 75, and then didn't get picked up until the end of the following year and released in early 77. So it took about 2 years. But I mean, I'd love to been able to keep going in that way, and then also Slow Dance. If Slow Dance had done well, I'd love to have been able to follow. Although it was incredible. I mean, Geese of the Ghost was with Mike, so there was this. But you know, I hate to tell you this, but I mean, Slow Dance is a very lonely place to be. Very lonely place to be, because you're backing your hunches, and you've no idea if you're coming up with something that's a complete waste of time, or whether you're. I was playing the odd section to Simon Hayworth and one or two other people who were being very positive, but you can see the attraction of library music later on, because it's quick output, quick feedback, and money.
Yeah.
And the other side of it was slow output, not much feedback, not a great deal of money. So
you had a record company go bust on you halfway through it, which didn't help. And then Simon came to the rescue.
Yes, he did.
With the money for the strings, I gather.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, Simon was wonderful. But it's so I never really turned my back on the stuff because it was too difficult. But simply just wasn't paying the bills. But when I look back at it, you know, I'm not going to be thinking, if people ask me what are you most proud of, I'm not going to be telling them the library music. I'm going to say the Geese, the Ghost, and Slow Dance, obviously.
Which are my two favourite albums.
But then I wasn't able to continue. I was not able to continue in that genre.
Yeah.
Straight after Slow Dance, it was we need pop songs and singles. So it was absolutely punk was breaking, disco. There was no question. We got the advance from Arista based on the fact that it was going to be a pop record. Yeah.
Is there any chance you might go back to that?
I don't have the energy now, to be honest.
Right.
A, I don't have the energy. B, I've got this problem with my right wrist, which is very restrictive.
For particularly guitar, I would imagine, but for
worse for piano, actually. It's worse.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Worse for piano. But the other critical thing to explain is that I kept up with the technical side till I was in my early 60s.
Yeah.
But now I can't. It's too complicated for me now.
Right.
And also, I've got a lot of trouble using a mouse, too much mouse stuff.
Okay.
So, and I can't afford to use my engineer all the time. You know, he's 300 quid a day.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, it's just impractical now, both from the health factor, but also to do an album of that sort of. I honestly don't have the energy. I mean, I've been 50 years at this, and I kind of quite burnt out, actually.
Well, you wouldn't guess that. I mean, Strings of Light, for example, which is quite recent.
Yeah, I sweated blood on that, though. I mean, that really was. Peter Cross always talks about the 5% inspiration, 95% perspiration. That was absolutely that, because I could play those pieces after a fashion, but I couldn't play them in concert standard. So the difference between writing them in bits and playing little sections, and I didn't want to do it in little sections and edit. I wanted to do a performance, and then you replace the bits which are wrong. So the stamina and the control, that's hours of practice.
Yeah.
So I was doing 4 to 6, 7 hours of practice a day.
Wow.
And falling asleep during the middle of something, because A, I was bored, B, I was tired.
Yeah.
And it got so repetitive. But that comes, I think, also with the fact that you're not doing enough of it. So, because the computer works, so your technique gets less. Exactly the same thing has happened to Trevor Rabin.
Right.
He admitted that because he was doing all the film work. When he came back to doing the Yes stuff, his technique had got much worse.
Right.
So he had to re-practice, but he didn't have the stamina because it's
Yeah.
every day playing. Whereas Chris Squire used to practice the bass 4 hours every day, according to Patricia, who knew
Oh,
him.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's the price you do for doing film work, is it's almost impossible still to have a really good, or TV work, because you're mucking it up with samples and you're doing...
Yeah.
Yeah, so my technique was definitely better in the 80s.
I mean, people also ask you, I know you've asked us a few times about, collaborations. In particular, I know you've done a bit of work with Steve Hackett, and of course, in the years gone by with Mike. And when you've been asked about that, you've made a comment like, well, particularly with Steve, you said, well, we're too similar. And maybe to some extent with Mike, you're too similar. And I kind of look at that and I think, well, actually, is similarity as such necessarily a problem? Can you not feed off each other? Or is it just something that's too complicated to happen because of busy schedules?
No, I think there's a big difference between the two, actually. One is that Mike and I grew up together playing, so we'd kind of developed a style that was simpatico, and it was almost telepathico as well.
Yes.
So that was never a problem. Steve latterly became a very good friend, and I was going to do nothing to damage that relationship.
Okay.
And I just remember thinking, hang on, we both play guitar, but you've got very definite ideas now about what you want to do, because you've been a solo artist. You're answerable to a live audience, and I don't want to risk this, and I'm not going to be able to go on the road with you as well. So I just didn't want to take the chance with it.
Okay.
I'd always worked with Mike. I mean, Mike did actually ask me if I wanted to try and help it do some writing on for Mike and the Mechanics. But I turned it down because I just said, Mike, I don't think I can write in that style.
Yeah, I mean, he co-wrote with a few people on Out of the Blue, which was, I think, the last one they did, including Clark Datchler of Johnny Hates Jazz. He co-wrote some stuff with. I must admit, I contrasted to your music. I mean, it's very poppy. It is of a certain style, isn't it? The more recent stuff.
I've got nothing against that,
but it's different. Not for you, perhaps, is what I was
I
kind of
didn't
saying.
really feel like it could contribute. You see, I mean, he also had a Mike and the Mechanics style, so I felt I would have had to fit into that style, which I couldn't necessarily. And I'm not really a pop animal. I haven't been a pop animal for a long time. Yeah, not really good at writing pop songs.
I'm not really a pop animal either, to be honest. But I mean, some of it.
But why should one apologise? I mean, ultimately, although it's had much more longevity than during previous eras. I mean, it still is ultimately aimed at a younger audience, isn't it? And it's perhaps it's a bit arrogant and pompous to say, when I became a man, I put away childish things. But as you grow up, your tastes do change. A lot of the stuff I like is because it's nostalgia from that time. But versions of stuff by Oasis, which sound like the Beatles, it's all right. But why would I want to listen to it? Yeah, I can respect some of them, but it doesn't do anything for me because I'm a wrong age.
Well, Anthony, we're going to have to leave it there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll move on to part 2 in a minute, where we'll talk about your musical influences. But thank you for now for
absolute pleasure.
Your time.
Yes, it's been a golden hour talking to you.
Has it been a golden? It has been almost a golden hour. Actually, we'll see how near we are to the mark.
That was part 1 of a 2-part audio and video podcast with Anthony Phillips, the former Genesis guitarist. It was brought to you by Godalming-based Make a Difference with Records. We donate all our proceeds to the charity Catalyst, who are best known for their work in the mental health space.